Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel for the first episode in our new series set in Dark Sun called Dark Fun in the Dark Sun. I feel like I've been away for a while, but I am back now and we are ready to go with this new campaign that we just started up last Friday. If you're interested in what this campaign is, it's actually the Freedom campaign, which runs concordantly with the campaign that we just finished in Welcome to the Dark Sun. So basically it's the same events, just kind of from a different perspective of things. The eventual plan is to have our characters in this story reach the same level as our characters that were in Welcome to the Dark Sun. And if we still like Athos after that, we're gonna continue on with more adventures and we'll just pick which character we want out of the two. But first things first, when you start a new campaign, you need new characters. So that's the first thing that we did on Friday. We sat there for several hours and we all rolled new characters. Save the player that played Dono. He wasn't there last session, but he should be here for the next session. So I'll give you his stats and all that jazz when I have it. First things first, I guess I'll start with my character. If you remember in the last one, I played a Thrycree named Salentithius who was a rogue. This time, a little bit different. I'm playing an elf druid of the Circle of the Shepherd, which is in Xanathar's Guide. And the really neat thing about that is you can cast these auras to help your party. So you can cast a bear and everyone gets extra temporary hit points. You can cast a hawk spirit and everyone gets extra perception. And you can cast a unicorn spirit and that means that if you heal anybody, everybody in that aura will get extra hit points, which is pretty awesome. We're trying to reskin those to make more sense in Dark Sun, but for now we're just going with bear, hawk, and unicorn. And my character's background is an outlander because I thought it made sense with an elf in Dark Sun and being a druid and all that. And her name is Raylan Ortego. So the next character was made by the player who played Nibbles last session. If you remember, Nibbles was a halfling monk, and actually prior to that campaign, the player had always played dwarves because she loves dwarves. And then she played a halfling, and now she is all about the halflings. It's mainly like that lucky roll, I think, where if you crit fail, you get to roll again. So for this campaign, she's made another halfling. This time she's decided to be a bard with an entertainer's background, and her name is Little Jenny. And that's kind of where we're at for personality and all that right now, but I'm sure as the story goes on, we'll get to know more. Next, I'm going to talk about the character from the player who played Vashti. If you remember, Vashti was a half-elf bard. And this time the player made a character named Kadan, who is a dwarf, an earth cleric, but focusing in the grave domain, which is part of Xanathar's Guide as well. Like my character, his background is as an outlander, and his focus, because he's a dwarf, is to create a small village at some point. Now here's where it starts to get fun and ridiculous, and the reason that we were all in tears, basically laughing and crying while we were playing this session. The guy that played Bardock, you remember Bardock? He was the grumpy old mall druid that everybody hated. He was very set on playing a half-giant. In fact, he almost played a half-giant for the last campaign, but I think he decided, you know, forays into Dark Sun, maybe let's go with a mall first and kind of go from there. So before we even really got to the point of picking our characters, there were jokes that we should just play an entire half-giant barbarian party. So that was the plan, except it wasn't really the plan for most of us, but he was dead set on playing a half-giant barbarian. And his roles worked out really well for him. He is a very powerful, very strong half-giant. He tried to convince the guy who previously played Vashti to play as his half-giant barbarian brother. It didn't work out, but we'll get to that. So his name is Yuri, Lord Jackhammer Largeson. And basically his background is he's an entertainer and his goal is to be like the best wrestler around, like WWE kind of thing, like just entertain people, be a strong man, and fight. And his main overarching goal in life is to get someone to follow him around and oil up his muscles, which is definitely something to look forward to. And I'll point out that he's not particularly intelligent, which kind of causes some troubles. But the neat thing about half-giants is they can roll for their alignment every day, so I think his stationary one is at neutral, but you know, he can roll chaotic, lawful, or neutral each day to see kind of what comes up, which is pretty hilarious. And lastly, we have the guy who played Drudok, who was another Thrycreen, who was a bard, and he rolled up a half-giant to be Lord Jack Hammer's brother. It's actually funny because it was literally luck of the roll that made him a half giant. He was like, how many options do we have? 6. He rolled a d6, got half giant. So guess that's his brother now. And his name is Halvar Large Son. And the last name was like, we need a last name. And I was like, Large Son. So it's really funny. And unlike his brother, who's a barbarian, he's actually a ranger and he's a folk hero. And they're just kind of just two idiots, giant, very tall idiots when they get together. So if you know anything about the Freedom campaign, basically the way it starts is you're doing your thing and then you become a slave. My DM didn't want us to start with all these really cool things that we liked and then become slaves, so he said, you're gonna be slaves from the start and we'll just do flashbacks to figure out how you got into slavery. So basically we start the session being processed and getting thrown into the pits. Everything that we had on us was taken away or burned or coveted by the Templar. We basically walked in with just rags on and a really thin bedroll. When we got into like the slave pit area, nobody else was really there because they were all working, so we were able to kind of go pick a place that we wanted to stay. Our DM made a little mistake here, which we're gonna rectify in the next session, where he had the large sons put on the outside, because that's where he thought the half giants were supposed to be, because he didn't read it properly, but it's actually like where the half giant guards are supposed to be. So they were out there that night, and then the 3 of us, little Jenny, Kadan, and Raylan were all on the inside. So we were looking around like, let's find a place to lay down to sleep. So we found a little corner, and little Jenny and Raylan laid down and kind of got settled, while Kadan was kind of over in the middle, wasn't too concerned. Well, some people came up and they're like, listen, you're in our spot. And I was like, you know what, it's been a long day. No, this is my spot. And they didn't really like that. So first things first, little Jenny put a hold on one of those people and I killed one really quickly. While little Jenny and Raylan are kind of taking care of these people, Kadan's like, should I get involved? Shouldn't I get involved? And because the Largeson brothers were outside of the pen, the DM actually had them playing Thrycreen that were attacking us. And they were really giving us a run for our money. But fortunately, my character I feel is like really awesome and more of a spellcaster than I've ever really used. And just kind of a force to be reckoned with. So we did pretty good and we managed to take them all out. And most of them, if not all of them, died. So after that, we got to keep our spots, mostly because the people who were messing with us were dead, so nobody wanted to mess with us further. And then in the morning, the Largeson brothers joined us inside, and we grabbed our water rations for the day, and then we got set up with our task teams. So the Largeson brothers and Kadan were set up to be hauling water from the water well over to where it gets mixed with some dirt. And little Jenny and Raylan were there to mix the dirt and then move it further on to be made into bricks. The water crew had an overseer named Klothos, who the boys got along surprisingly well with to start. And then the other 2 had an overseer named Phoebus, who was a half-elf, I believe, and he was just kind of a jerk. Little Jenny right away made fun of him, and he was like, what did you say? And so she made fun of him some more, and he tried to crack his whip at her and failed. And so she made fun of him some more. And so they are off to a great start, as you might imagine. The way the pits work is everything is really terrible. It's really hot. You don't get enough water rations to survive. You don't get enough food to survive. And if you aren't working, they'll just kill you. It's a great place to be. And so we got to witness pretty immediately this human going crazy, and then the guards just killed him. There's 2 breaks per day. One is in the morning when you get up, you get your water ration, and then at night you get a little bit more water and you get some food, but that's it, you just work straight through. And the food's not that great, and like I said, the water's not enough, so every day you have to roll to see if you're gonna be exhausted. And there are 6 levels of exhaustion. Once you hit level 6, you just dead. So one of the first things we needed to figure out how to do was how to get extra water and or extra food. Fortunately, as a cleric, Kadan has create water as a spell he can access, and as a druid, so does Raylan. Unfortunately, when you're in the pits, you only have a 30% chance of being able to switch out your spells. Kadan was able to get it on the first attempt. It took Raylan a couple days, but eventually she was able to get create water as well, which means that we were all kind of taken care of between the various means. At this point, we had a flashback to see how the brothers Largeson ended up in slavery, and well, this is where Bardock came back to haunt his player. If you remember, a long time ago, we were all sitting in the Golden Inix Inn, just having a good time, and this preserver came in, she looked around, and then she hit at one of the tables. And then some Templar with some guards came in, and they were like, tell me where this preserver is. And Bardock's like, right over there, she is right over there. And then because that table hadn't spoken up, or for whatever reason, they just took everybody at that table. Well, guess who was sitting at that table? The brothers Largeson. It's actually really funny because for the flashback, they had both rolled to see what their alignment was that day, and Lord Jackhammer was like lawful neutral, and so he was like, he's done right in turning us in. Also, he thinks that he might be a preserver because he's not really sure what's going on, so that's probably going to have some hilarious consequences later on. So then back to the present, back to that night in the slave pit, and we're just kind of chilling, and we see this shadowy figure moving along. The Large Sun brothers were still on the outside at this point, but the three of us were on the inside, and so I cast Pass Without Trace on us, and we went after this figure to see what was going on. And this guy went up to the guards, and he started talking about a plan, and it was very clear that this guy was a snitch. And so we followed along after him, and when he sat down getting ready for bed, I just snuck up beside him, I sat down next to him, and I was like, what's up, buddy? What have you been up to? And he got me on kitchen detail for that day, which was pretty awesome because I was able to sneak a little bit of extra water. But that was under the promise to not tell anyone. And I figured that I could probably keep that promise for a while as I figured out what was going on. The next morning, he was lurking around a group of people and we saw him. So little Jenny snuck up to try to see if she could hear anything, and then I went up to just get in his face so he couldn't listen to them. Little Jenny heard them say something about the word escape, but then they noticed that they were being watched and they just completely clammed up. We grabbed our water rations for the day, we went to our tasks, and here's where everything kind of went downhill. So Lord Jackhammer decided, I'm a little thirsty, I want a little more water. So while he was filling up his water bucket or whatever he was using to carry, he just kind of stuck his face under the spigot. Clothos was like, don't do that. And he's like, but I'm just gonna do it again. And he did it again. And Clothos was like, come on buddy, don't do it, and he did it again, and so Clothos whipped him. The thing about Halvar, his brother, is that he doesn't like bullies, especially when they're bullying his little brother. So Halvar punched Clothos in the back of the head when he wasn't paying attention, when he was telling the guards to put Lord Jackhammer in one of the pits. And so, as you might imagine, that ended up getting Halvar put in the pit as well. Meanwhile, over at like the mud mixing station, little Jenny's been having a good time, and she's been using minor illusion to make it seem like the guards keep calling Phoebus over, and so he keeps walking over to see if they're calling him, and they're not, and so she's sneaking extra water as well. But this whole commotion leaves poor Kadan to be the only one on the water crew going back and forth, back and forth. In the midst of all that, an overseer got stripped of his title because he wasn't meeting a quota. And then the next day he turned up dead in the slave pits. That's what you get. That night around dinner time, we snuck some food down to our friends because it was like worm infested food and the giants seemed to like the worms, so we snuck it down to them in the pits. But when everybody kind of went to sleep, the giants realized a very important thing. Halvar is 12 feet and a little bit, and Lord Jackhammer is I think 11 feet and 3 inches. And they realized that the pits are only 20 feet tall, which means they could just jump a little bit and they could pull themselves out. And so they're like, sweet, let's get out of the pit. Lord Jackhammer started to collect a bunch of random things to put in his pit for later so he could make some random crude weapons. And then we spotted the snitch from the night before wandering off to the guards again, and his name was Crew Rex, because I don't think I mentioned that already. So I cast Pass Without Trace again, and we went after him. Same deal, and he's telling the guards that they'd better act within 24 hours or it's gonna be too late. So I follow him back to creep on him again, and I'm like, listen, I wanna be in the kitchen again, because I'm still trying to figure out how I can use this to my advantage. And little Jenny goes after the group of people that she saw him listening to earlier to tell them that Krurix is onto them. Lord Jackhammer asks if he can squeeze this guy, and we're like, no, don't kill him just yet, like he might be useful. But then we wake up in the morning and he's dead, and Lord Jackhammer is like, but I could have squeezed him! Next, we flashed back to little Jenny to try to figure out how she ended up in slavery, and it was actually a situation that we had seen from the other side again, where someone got knocked into a fruit stand and then got accused of stealing from it because of stupid Senator Verassi. Such a jerk. And so little Jenny was the one that got pushed into the fruit stall, but she tried to run away and she managed to escape because she rolled really well. So that wasn't actually how she got caught, but it was super close. But we decided that as she was running out of the gates of Tyr, I was coming in from the tablelands, and I saw this little hobbit just scurrying out, and so later I'm gonna try to track her down so we can be friends. The next morning, the Large Sun brothers pull themselves out of the pit because they decide that they want water, and everybody, including Clothos, just kind of assume that they were released from the pits. When we're getting our rations for water in the morning, the preserver that got sold out is there. And because Lord Jackhammer is a little confused, thinks he's a preserver, but also thinks he's related to this woman, he's just calling her cousin. She seems to think that he's someone she can trust, and so she fills up his water skin and throws something extra in it. And so Lord Jackhammer ends up with like a small obsidian blade. About this time, Halvar says, "Listen, brother, I don't mind working, but at night I really liked being in the pit because I liked being around our friends." And his brother goes, "I agree with you." And they basically try to make it so they get put in the pit. Well, Lord Jackhammer goes a little too far and he gets pulled into a hut kind of on the outside of the pit, and there's a Templar in there. Meanwhile, Halvar punches Clothos in the back of the head again, and he ends up in a pit. But in this room with Lord Jackhammer is a black-robed Templar, and he's like, "Listen, can you snitch for us? Can you tell us if you hear anything about any plans or any preservers, and we'll help you out?" And he goes, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So they make him an overseer. And then they kind of hang Clothos up in a frame. He screwed up big time. He couldn't deal with these two half-giants. And in the midst of all of this, Kadan's water skin goes missing. He goes to check for it, it's gone, and so he looks around and he sees someone trying to steal Raylan's as well. He uses a spell to make the elf grovel, which prevents him from taking my water skin, and then he goes away, but he says something to the effect of, "You'll pay for that." Next, the Large Sun brothers' cousin, their human cousin, this preserver named Melanda, comes over and wants to know what the Templar asked Lord Jackhammer. And he straight up says he wants me to spy on people, tell them about plans and stuff, and I said I would, which makes her understandably a little bit nervous. But she gives extra rations to the brothers, and now with both Kadan and Raylan able to make water, and with Lord Jackhammer getting the extra rations of water because he's an overseer, we're all good. We're not gonna have to worry about exhaustion. A little bit later in the night, just before everybody's ready to bed down, 8 elves come up because they are mad at Kadan for making one of them grovel, and like he said, we were gonna pay for it. And so it was like fight on time. And the nice thing about this was this time all 5 of us were together, so it was a little bit better, but those Large Sun brothers, this is gonna be a fun one. Basically, Lord Jackhammer picked up one of the elves by the legs and started using him as a club. And then Halvar was making more kills, and so Lord Jackhammer was mad, so he took the elf club and in the middle of this fight, threw it at Halvar. And so what did Halvar do? He picked up the elf and he said, "I don't want your stupid dead rejects," and he threw it back at him. So like, the rest of us are fighting, there's like still 4 elves or something, and we're trying not to die, and these 2 idiots are fighting with each other. But they were able to come to an agreement that yes, throwing elves was very effective and it caused a lot of damage. Like, when Lord Jackhammer threw the elf at his brother, he almost killed him because unlike Lord Jackhammer, Halvar didn't roll very good for his hit points. And so he got like 11 points of damage from this dead elf, which is almost half his hit points, which would have been really terrible if his brother had killed him. But that's where we ended the session for the night. Lots of random stuff going on. We still need to figure out how Kadan, little Jenny, and Raylan end up in slavery. And like I said, there should be one more character to introduce next episode because the player who played Dono should be showing up to roll his new character. I hope you enjoyed this first episode of Dark Fun in the Dark Sun. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to pop them down below and I'll make sure to answer them right away. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. And so, Nibbles.